Welcome, everybody. This is the inaugural episode of the Business Success Show. And I'm Scott Patton, your co-host, and joining me every week, Friday around noonish, depending on where you are in North America, Chaffee-Thanh Nguyen. Hey, Chaffee, how are you doing today?
I am awesome. How are you, Scott?
I'm doing great. You're in Chicago, and I suspect you probably have cold weather, if not snow. I'm in Playa del Carmen in Mexico, and it's beautiful and sunny, but sometimes it pours.
Yeah, rub it in. Well, today, though, we actually have a warm breeze coming through. So it is about 60 degrees today. And then tomorrow it's dropping down to 40. So back to normal temperatures.
Awesome. Chaffee and I have just finished 9 Udemy courses on networking, and we have a couple other ones on living your passion, and I forget there's one more and I forget the name. I've got it somewhere. And we decided that this might be a good time to do some live streams and just talk about things that had to do with business success. Chaffee is an excellent business success coach. I did some internet marketing coaching 20 years ago and decided that I did not want to continue that as a career. However, I end up doing lots of coaching with my clients as we do different things. So, but I'm not here as a coach, and I'm not wanting to be a coach. And I think that's one of the ways that people can become successful, knowing what it is you want to do and what it is you don't want to do. Because I think, and of course, how do you know you don't want to do it? Do it for a couple of years and see if you still want to do it. Right? Because we all know one of my best friends in the world forever. I've known him since like grade 8. He grew up in the ultimate WASP family house in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, and his mom made like meat and potatoes, and that was it. Macaroni and cheese. So, you know, we'd be out, we'd finish work, and I'd say, okay, let's go for a beer. And he'd say, yeah. And there'd be like, there wouldn't just be the 2 of us, there'd be like 10 of us, right? Young kids, and in our early 20s, late teens. And I'd say, well, you know, rather than going to the bar or the pub, let's go have Chinese food. No, I don't like Chinese food, he'd say. For 3 years, he refused to go to the Chinese restaurant. Finally, I don't know why, he broke down, he came. He didn't know what to order. We ordered, of course, the plates that you shared. He loved Chinese food. So then we said, well, we should go have pizza. No, I don't like pizza. And for 3 years, he wouldn't come to the pizza place with us. Finally, he did, and son of a gun if he didn't like pizza. So part of the moral of the story is try new things and see if you like them. And then also try things that you think you'll like and see if you like them. And maybe you will, maybe you won't. And that's how you start the process to find things that you love to do. Because I think you would agree, Chaffee, that if you do what you love and you can make money at it, that's kind of the ideal life.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a combination of not only finding out what you love to do, which some people are still searching, as you say, Scott. It's also the other piece of that is, how do you monetize that? How do you create money from that to support you so that it's not a job, it's not something that you learn to start hating, right? It's something that you can continue doing that you love to do versus just another job. As I said, how does it not become work for you? That's critical.
Yeah, it really is, especially if you're working for yourself as an entrepreneur, as opposed to, well, I mean, lots of people will go and they'll work at McDonald's when they're a teenager, and then they'll go work somewhere else and somewhere else and somewhere else. And they may or may not find satisfaction in all those different jobs.
And the good thing, Scott, is that you'll find, or you'll discover, if you've been doing this business like we have long enough, is that you can pretty much monetize anything. I mean, it's amazing with today's technology what you can do and how much money you can make. You can become an influencer in your own little tiny niche that no one knows about until you shared it with everybody, and you can make, tons of money, and you make a good living with it. So technology has enabled us to do amazing things if you just, think about it and you work with the right people, of course.
Absolutely. All right. So before we get too far into it, if you are enjoying our conversations, make sure you give us a like, a thumbs up, subscribe, share if you're on Facebook or some other place where you can share. And also, we're live, so ask questions. And if it's after when we've stopped being live, I get notifications when you ask the questions. I'll keep a hold of them, and the following show, we'll go through those questions before we move on. And the goal of the show is actually just to start. And one of, like business success, I thought that's a really bad name. But you know what? I only had 30 seconds to figure out the name because we went live, because I didn't think about it before. So that's what it is today. But next week, it might be different. And you know what? It's only pixels, folks, and I can move them all around so they make a different word. And that's another part, I think, of the secret to success, is not waiting for perfection, not waiting till all the ducks are in a row, because we don't always know, right? Like, we have this really nice kind of background and a white line kind of around most of Chaffee's box and my box. And that to me looks a lot better than this. So I spent 10 or 15 minutes before we started to make this image so that we would have a kind of a nice background and it would look a little bit better. And I can do that because I have 5 or 6 or 7 other live streams like this that I do with clients and other folks. And so I've had practice doing this. But if we were just starting out, it would be looking an awful lot like this, which I personally think is kind of boring and ugly. And so I like
my shirt, though.
It matches your shirt. Yeah. Like if we do this now, Chaffee, you get a little bit closer and it's going to be all black on your side. And the point of it being is you don't want to start with perfection, because as you go through the process of creating, you discover things. And Chaffee might say, you know what, Scott, when I was a little kid, I was chased, bullied, and I ran into this wall of this office building, and office buildings now freak me out, and I really don't like this backdrop. So could you please change it to a beach or the stars or something else? And that's not a big deal, and it's not a problem. But if I started off like this, Chaffee would just say, well, this is the way it is, and who cares? And he would just probably put up with it, or he would never give me the feedback. So I think it's important that you just start, and then you say, okay, how can we improve? And you do these little improvements over and over again. And we have a video to start the show. And again, that's like, I have a program that I can do that fairly quickly. And I found this one, and I really didn't have, 3 hours to sit there and figure out, well, is this good, or is this the best, or is that not? But we've done the one, and you know what? I don't really like it because it's really hard to read. I didn't realize that when I made it. So next week, there'll be a different one. And Chaffee might say, Scott, I don't like those colors. They're not my color. And so we'll change that. But the point is that you need to start, and then you need to improve. And so that's what we're doing today, is we are starting. And we would really appreciate if you would leave us comments or give us feedback and say, hey, these are topics that we'd love for you to talk about when it comes to business. Or that was a really interesting topic you talked about today about just starting, and I have a question about it, and we can delve into these things deeper. So we want this to be as much your show as our show. And having said all of that, our topic for today is going to be all about comfort zones. And but before we get into that, Chaffee, anything you want to add to what I've said?
Yeah, it's funny, Scott. We had a handful of topics that we thought we might want to discuss on this first show, and you decided that we should only pick one because we can talk an hour on each one of these topics, at least an hour. And in your intro there, I think you covered like 3 or 4 of them, and I didn't want to cut you off because you're on a roll. And the reason why we can talk about an hour for each one of these is because we haven't even gotten to the comfort zone topic yet, and it's already 10 minutes in.
10 minutes in. Well, what we discovered making the Udemy courses together was, normally we'd break it into lectures, and there'd be like 10 lectures. Okay, 10 lectures times 5 minutes is 50 minutes, an intro and an introduction and a wrap up, and we've got an hour-long course. That was our goal. And what we discovered quite quickly was each lecture took an hour for us to talk about, because we would just riff on each other and bring things up, and I'd be like, okay, that's enough about this, and Chaffee would say, wait, what you just said, tweak this, and then he'd say something, and we'd be ready to go to the next one. I'd say, wait, you tweaked me on that. So I didn't even realize that I had covered anything on that list, but I wanted to kind of just start. So, Chaffee.
So we should probably start, Scott, because
let's start. You're in a black top. I'm in a, I don't know if it's orange or not, but it's close to it. And those might be our colors, and they might be different next week. So comfort zone. What are we talking about when we're talking about a comfort zone, Chaffee?
So comfort zone obviously is, just like it says, it's a zone, right? An area that you're comfortable with, something that you're familiar with, and you feel safe inside of it. It's like a turtle shell, right? When a turtle feels danger, he pulls in all his arms and his legs and his head, and he's in his little comfort in his shell, right? And so when you're in your comfort zone, sometimes you're in your shell. Now, when you think about it, yes, you're safer. Yes, you feel protected. Yes, you feel like you can ward off threats and everything. And at the same time, with your head and your legs inside your little shell, you're not going anywhere. You're stuck. You're immobile. And so you're just sitting right there, not going anywhere, not moving anywhere, not doing anything. And while it, again, might feel good, after a certain point of time, then danger starts to occur, because you can only stay inside that comfort zone for so long before you start getting hungry, before your legs start cramping up, before you're not moving anything, and you end up dying instead of growing, right? And so that's one of the biggest challenges with business success, Scott, is just staying within that comfort zone and thinking that you're making progress in your life. In reality, you're not moving anywhere and you're not doing anything.
So you just made me remember, as you were talking, it occurred to me, Blockbuster was a very, very successful company. And some people may or may not know this. Well, I guess some people know it and some people don't. Netflix tried to get Blockbuster to buy them. And now Blockbuster is basically an empty shell with nothing in it if you look at the stores, and Netflix is like super popular.
I think there's only one store left, Scott.
Okay. Well, I know near where I live in Canada, there is a store that still has the Blockbuster. They didn't even take it down, but there's nothing in it, right? It's sitting there, and soon it'll just collapse, I guess, because it doesn't look like anybody else is going to go in there either. And that's an example of a company that was really in its comfort zone. It said, hey, no, this is what we do. Railways are another really good example, because before there were planes and before we had all these highways, trucking wasn't really that big, and everything was shipped by rail. And they thought they were in the railway business. They didn't realize they were in the transportation business. Because if they'd have realized they were in the transportation business when they started building all these highways and making all these trucks and building all these airports and putting these planes in them, they would have said, hey, we've got tons of cash. Let's put our cash into these two new disruptive technologies and continue to be dominant in the transportation of goods and services in North America. And of course, now, there's very little of that going on compared to, what's going on in trucking and, FedEx and those companies. They don't buy railways to ship; they buy planes to ship.
Hey, Scott, I'll give you two more examples since we're listing off examples. They're back in the early 2000s, late 90s. There was this little company that nobody knew about, and they approached a big company named Yahoo, and they said, "Hey, we're looking to sell our search engine. It's called Google. Are you interested?" And Yahoo, who was the biggest search engine at the time, comfortable in their lead said, yeah, we're not interested. Fast forward 2 decades later, 20 years later, and Google is now one of the 5 biggest companies in the entire world. And Yahoo is shutting down services that no one's using anymore. So,
yeah, they used to be so big. I remember every day I would go to Yahoo and I would just check the news headlines. Then I had my email. And if I needed to know something, I would do the search in Yahoo. And they just dropped the ball.
And then there's something that's occurring right now in today's economy, especially here in the U.S. and in China and all over the world. That's really taking root. It's a little company called Tesla. And in the United States, we had 3 big car companies who were all comfortable in their size, worldwide lead and everything. And here comes this little upstart that wants to do this electric thing. And they all wanted to stick with their, gas burning SUVs and the Hummers and everything that was doing well. And all of a sudden they got caught up. And now Tesla is bigger than all of the car companies combined. I mean, it's ridiculous how big Tesla has become when, these companies have been around for 100+ years, and they could have easily gotten in the electric vehicle market decades ago, and they didn't. And they were just comfortable with their lead, building their cars and selling them. And all of a sudden Tesla takes them over. So it's, you got to be careful of being too comfortable, not paying attention to what's going on and what's happening outside.
Yeah, and that applies to the company side, and it also applies to, I think, your personal or your entrepreneurial side. And one thing I think that people don't consider as much as they should is the different stages of our lives, right? Like we know, I went to elementary school and I went to high school and they were different. And we know this kind of in a general way, but we don't think of it moving forward. So, for example, you're in your 20s, you're thinking, I'm going to get married, I'm going to have some kids. Then you don't necessarily really think about what that means and what that means in terms of your life and your lifestyle and that sort of stuff. And then in my case, my children have all left home, and so I'm an empty nester. And each of these stages, what you're comfortable with is different, right?
Yeah.
So, I was really comfortable. I had the house, I had the yard, the kids would play catch in the yard and that sort of stuff. Now I'm traveling the world and I'm in a different city, every month sort of thing. It's totally, totally different. And I noticed, because we had this shutdown, I was 8 or 9 months in Medellin, Colombia, and I started putting down roots. And when I left, it was incredibly difficult for me to leave. Although for the previous 3 or 4 years, I would be, 3 weeks here, 4 weeks there, 5 weeks somewhere else. And I never had that experience of uprooting myself the way I did from this last sort of shutdown thing. So it's very easy to get comfortable where you are, and even if it's an uncomfortable situation, you get comfortable with it. And then when it's no longer the uncomfortable situation, it's hard because you no longer have that uncomfort that you're comfortable with.
The truth is, Scott, you didn't want to leave your hammock. And you didn't want to leave the daily lunches that were being delivered to you.
The food was great.
So, but yeah, I mean, that's the thing, though, right? Is that like I said earlier, you felt comfortable there, you felt safe, everything was moving easily, right? It was like you had this routine that you were accustomed to.
Yeah. And
so you felt like things were moving and progressing, when in reality you're just stuck there. and I, a great example of that is one of my buddies from college. Actually, he's a buddy from high school that I went to college with, and he actually was just brilliant. I mean, he was a very smart guy, and he ended up graduating college in 4 years. And we went to the University of Illinois, so it was a big, college that wasn't easy. And he ended up graduating with 3 degrees at the same time in 4 years that everybody else graduated with. Took me 5 years to get 1 degree. It took him 4 years to get 3, right? And one of them was mathematics, another one was physics, and another one was another technical one, I forget. Only they weren't like, just blow off degrees. They were actually very difficult degrees to get. Well, after college, he decided that he wanted to go overseas and spend a little time overseas just exploring things. And he ended up getting a job at a resort in Thailand. And what he did in Thailand was that he became a scuba diver instructor in Thailand. And for 6 months after college, that's all he did was teach people how to scuba dive in, 85-degree temperature water, beautiful weather year round. And the resort paid for his housing. Like, he stayed at the resort, right? They covered all his food. He had no expenses.
Nice.
And he was getting paid to teach people how to scuba dive, which he loved to do. And then it was funny, after 6 months, we talked and everything. And he's like, the biggest challenge is that I'm in a rut. He's like, he's got all these degrees, and here he is teaching scuba diving at a resort, and he's just like, I love doing it, except I'm not going anywhere, and he's not making a lot of money. Only it's plenty enough for him to survive and be comfortable on.
Right.
And so he actually, just like you, Scott, he had to uproot himself and really force himself to go look for a job, even though he was just happy and comfortable where he was. He's just like, I can't do this forever. So just thinking longer term, he had to push himself to do something else and get out of that comfort zone that he was in. So
yeah, that's a really good point, because what your friend did was he said, what are my life goals?
Yeah.
And the life goal I have is this, but what I'm doing is that. And what I'm doing is comfortable, it's fun, I'm enjoying it, everything else. And I'll bet you that there were probably 3 or 4 guys somewhere in Thailand, not necessarily at that resort, who were in their 40s, 50s, and 60s and did not look at their life goals and got into that comfort zone of being there, and then ended up 30 years went by and they were still there. And are they happy? Are they not happy? I don't know. But I suspect that if you go to the bar every night and get drunk, it's because you're not that happy. And that tends to be, a clue. Let's just put it that way. So,
well, and then you got to imagine too, is that there were actually a lot of people who looked at what he was doing and saying, what are you, crazy? You're living the life right now. You got really no responsibilities. You're doing what you love, scuba diving, right? All your expenses are taken care of. Why don't you just stay there for a little bit longer, right? And so you're always going to have people on both sides telling you, what you should or shouldn't do.
Right. And that's a decision that we alone can make in our lives. And I think that's really important. And one of the reasons why it's hard is our society is so fast paced, and this, that, and the other thing. And there's so much information, and there are thousands of TV channels now. I mean, I can remember growing up and that was like the dream, 300 channels. And now that's a joke, 300 channels. Are you kidding me? And so because of that, it's really, really difficult for us to sit down with ourselves and know what it is we really want. And one of the things that I do at the beginning of every year in January is I take about a week and I go somewhere where I'm by myself usually. And part of my goal is to sit down and think about, what do I want to accomplish in this year? And it's usually just this year, but that hopefully applies to a goal of the next 5 years or 10 years. And so that what I'm doing this year builds on what I want to accomplish in a little bit longer term. And most people are just, hey, New Year's party, that's great. And then it's like, the advertisements tell me I got to go to the gym for a while, so I'm going to go do that and lose some weight. And then it's Valentine's Day and I got to find someone to date. And then it's Easter, I got to go with my family. And the next thing you know, it's January again. And if you're not careful, you won't have accomplished anything that you wanted to accomplish. And I'm a firm believer that when we get into our 60s, 70s, let's say 80s and 90s, and we're not able to be as active as we are, and we have time, we're forced because of our body and everything else to sort of sit with ourselves, that we look back on our lives and how many regrets do we have because we did the easy thing, stayed in our comfort zone on topic today, as opposed to doing the hard thing that would have given us more of our life. And I always thought that when you got old, you were at peace, right? And my grandma made it to 103. And
wow.
Yeah, and of course she's my grandma, so she's always nice and happy around me. And like when she's like 103, she can't keep her anger in anymore, and she is angry for no reason at my aunts, right? And my mom, who, like the daughter's in-law. And I thought, Grandma, like, you're 103. How can you be so mad? Right? And I don't know what the problem was or anything else, but all I know is that when I'm 103, I'm not going to be mad, because what that taught me was thinking about when you're 30. I used to say, when I'm 60, will I regret doing or not doing this? Now I have to say, when I'm 80, will I regret doing or not doing this? But I found that was a really good tool growing up.
I wish my 12-year-old would ask that question, or when you're 20, you ask that question.
Right. So what are some of the other, like, one of the reasons I think people stay in their comfort zone is they don't have a burning desire. What's your thoughts on that, Chaffee?
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's actually one of our topics that we brought up that we can spend another hour on, Scott. I think. And so yeah, when, and this is going to touch on, these topics, it's funny, these topics overlap in so many different ways, right?
Yes.
And so one of them is obviously not having a burning desire. When you have a burning desire, and I just want to touch on this real quick, so we won't dive into it too much. When you have a burning desire, it's like you said, Scott, exactly what it is that you want. And so you're always going to start gravitating towards that area, and it's like a pull, right? And so
Yes.
I always say you're either being pushed towards something or you're being pulled towards something. And being pulled towards something is stronger than if you have to, get pushed towards something, because you're almost like resisting, right? Whereas you're being pulled, it's dragging you forward, and you have no choice except to move forward. And so when you have that burning desire and you're stuck in your comfort zone, you're being pulled out of your shell, and it forces you to stick your head out and start moving forward. Otherwise, again, it just gets you, as your grandma is, more and more angry because you're not moving forward, and you feel this tug, and you're like, I got to do something. And so
Right.
that burning desire is so critical to get out of that comfort zone. In addition to, it's when you don't know what it is you want, and there's so many different options, then again, you tend to go back into what you're comfortable with, right? And so starting a new business, which is what we're talking about, starting a new chapter in your life and a new venture there's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of things that you're unaware of. There's a lot of challenges that are ahead. And so instead of moving forward and testing and doing things, you go back into that comfort zone again. And so that's really one of the biggest challenges that I've seen working with a lot of students across the country, around the world, when working on building a new business, is that they're so scared of the unknown, and they don't know what their true burning desire is, those two things in particular, that it drives them back into their comfort zone, and they don't make the progress that they want to make, right? So
yeah. And you were kind of reminding me of a turning point in my business was actually creating courses on Udemy. And as we said before, we just did 9 on networking. And the reason that it happened was a fellow that I know, and not well then and not well now, asked me to come and talk to his marketing people about podcasting. And he was there. And when we were done 2 hours later, he was just like, wow, like, you just know so much. And that's a problem that a lot of people have, is we discount how much we know in our topic area. And he said, you have to make a video course on this. And I'm like, well, I have a 3-page PDF, that's enough. And he was like insistent. And I said, okay, it was like, and I just did it. Like, I don't know if it was my people pleasing self or part of me that just said, he's right, just do what he said. I don't know what it was. And I did that. And the result of that was it created credibility for me that I didn't have before. And the way I describe it is the 5 years before I did that course, I'd be knocking on doors. Do you want a podcast? No. Do you want a podcast? No. Do you want a podcast? No. Do you want a podcast? Kind of, I don't know, maybe. See me next week. And I'll tell you, I hate knocking on doors. and that's not the type of sales that I can do very well. And so it was a struggle. And as soon as I started doing that course, and as soon as I started getting people into, growing the student body and all the rest of it, people started coming to me and saying, "Hey, Scott, you're the podcast guy. I need help with making a podcast." And it just it was like night and then it was day. There was no sunrise. It was that fast and that different. And so it really is important that you listen to the messages that you get in your life, right? And of course you have to have discernment. If they'd said you should be a butcher, Scott, if he just said you're bad at podcasting, Scott, go be a butcher at the grocery store, go back into the grocery store, I don't think I would do that. But it really struck me as something I did not want to do. I had no desire to do. And then I spent the next 3 or 4 months making that course, and everything changed after that. So it's really funny how you.
So I like that story, Scott, because you did something that one of my buddies did not do, which is you listened, right? And you moved forward with that, and it changed your life. It made a big difference. And early on when I had started my business, this was 20 years ago, I had a buddy that I was working with in the corporate world, and he wanted to start a business too. And he looked and saw what I was doing. He was like, "Man, I really want to start a business. I want to do kind of, some of the things that you're doing." And I'm like, "Well, I can help you. Like, I'm here. You ask me questions. I'll help you move forward." And for about a year, that's all I heard was, "I really want to start a business. I want to do something." And he never did it. Okay. And so then one day he decided he wanted a new car. And I got to tell you, his excuses for not starting a new business was, "I'm too busy. I have too much stuff to do. I don't have any time. And, it's going to be too hard." So, so I heard all the excuses over that past year of why not to start a business, except when he wanted to buy a new car. Now, here's the thing, is he spent the next 6 months, 2 to 3 hours a day minimum, doing research on new cars.
Wow.
And after 6 months, he's like, "I bought a new car," right? So he found a car that he liked. He spent 6 months researching it, 2 to 3. And that's all I heard about for the next 6 months was, about the different cars and, the gas mileage and all this kind of stuff. And I just looked at him and said, if you would have just taken the same amount of effort that you put into finding a new car into starting your business, you'd be doing pretty dang well right now.
Yeah.
And it didn't click in his head, and that's the same thing about going back to your comfort zone. He was comfortable just doing research, looking for a new car and spending the money because that's something he was familiar with. And so he never listened to me, even though I pushed him that I'm here, I can help you, I can move, you can move forward with this. He never listened to me. And so he ended up buying a new car and not starting a business. And then, as he got older, he ended up getting kids and spending time with the kids and yada, yada, yada. And, he never started that business. And then here's the kicker. About a year ago, he called me up and he said, "I'm getting cut from my job." So his job was cutting some heads, and it was his time to go. And here I am. I've been working 10 years, by myself with my own business, controlling my time and everything. And he's asking me, and it's funny, he's still stuck in that same mindset of the 9 to 5. I got to find a new job. And I'm like, well, this is an opportunity for you to do something that you really want. Your kids are a little bit older now. And, he's like, "Yeah, I'm only, blah, 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 blah." So some people just, like I said, he didn't have a big burning desire, which we talked about. And he was stuck in that mindset of 9 to 5, getting a weekly paycheck, and just doing that thing. So it's this entrepreneur, this business thing it's a different world, right? And I get it, it's not for everybody. And if you want to succeed in it, then you really, like you said, Scott, have to have a reason and a desire to get out of that comfort zone and start doing some things and taking some chances.
Yeah. And yeah, boy, that there's just a whole pile of stuff that you said that I could just unpack on. And I'll have to make some notes, so we'll cover it in the coming episodes, because there's it is really difficult to do it alone. Like, I mean, there are people that can do it alone, right? But I mean, and you've mentioned coaches and mentors and that sort of stuff, but also having a support group of people. If all of your buddies, go on Friday night to play hockey and have 3 beer or whatever afterwards, and they all have 9 to 5 jobs and are truckers or heavy duty mechanics or office workers or whatever, then that's going to kind of hold you in that type of mindset and environment where it's saying, you need to get a job and you got to get a raise and maybe get a promotion, and that's how you get successful in life. Whereas if you're with a group of people that are, have started their own business or building their own business and have done that, then you get a totally different mindset and totally different way of looking at things, and it becomes real, right? Like if your whole world is people that are working 9 to 5 jobs, whether it's in the office or the trades, then that's what you should be doing, because hey, that's what everybody's doing, and we tend to be joiners and do what our support group does, right? So you really there's so much that you have to look at when you want to do something different, right? And as you were talking, I was thinking, my son, he wants to buy a place and rent it out and be a real estate investor, right? So last two years I've been immersed in real estate investing, and I'm like, I'm not giving you any money to do this, because I can see he doesn't have the right attitudes. He's not taking the right actions. He just has heard that people have bought houses, they get rent, and he thinks he'll buy a house, he'll get rent, and there'll be no work. And I'm thinking, you got a young family, you want to spend time with your family, you want to go away for 2 weeks into the woods with no TV and no radio and no phone, and what's going to happen if you have a place and the toilet backs up and the guy's like wants to, anyway, you can sort of tell who's ready and who's not, right? And so you need to put yourself in a position for success. So we're definitely going to be talking a lot about mindset, because I think you made a great point, Chaffee. There's such a difference between the mindset of an entrepreneur and the mindset of someone who works 40 hours, 40 years for the same company.
Yeah, absolutely. And I tell you, Scott, it's when you have the mindset of an entrepreneur and you're willing to take those chances and you're willing to get out of that comfort zone and surround yourself with people like you, Scott, and put a team together that's going to help you get there. It really does open your eyes to an entirely different world that you just never knew. And just like my friend in Thailand, right? Ignorance sometimes is bliss, right? So you're in this little world and you're happy in your little world, only there's a whole bigger world out there. And you got to ask yourself, do you want to be a big fish in a little tiny pond? Or, do you want to get out of that and explore the bigger ocean that's out there, right there? So,
yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great place to stop. Chaffee, here's your website. If you want to know more about what Chaffee does and the coaching that he supplies, head over to keyconceptcoaching.com. And here's Chaffee's Udemy URL. So head over there and take a look at the courses that we've put together. I think you'll find them really helpful and beneficial. Make sure that you like, thumbs up, subscribe, hit that bell. And Chaffee, before we go, any last words of wisdom?
Well, real quick about my website, it is being upgraded this weekend. So if you go there and it's down, just come back early Monday and it should be back up. And the words of wisdom are, if you want to succeed in this business, ask a lot of questions and be willing to take action. Without action, you could listen to as many trainings and read as many books and everything that you want in the world. And if you don't take action, nothing's going to happen. And the more questions you ask, the more answers you're going to get. And as I always tell my little kid or my kids, which is, if you don't ask, you don't get, right? So take a bunch of action and ask a bunch of questions, and you'll be surprised at the results that you get.
Okay, well, I have to end with a story of my children when they were in that 7 to 10-year-old range, and we were walking in the park, and the park had swings and it had tires and it had all this stuff. And I'm walking down the path, and my 10-year-old son is walking with me, and my 7-year-old son is like a butterfly. He's over here, he's over there, he's running all over the place. And then he runs up to us and he says, "Dad, can I go on the swings?" And I look at him without hesitation. I say no. And he goes, "Oh." And then he's flitting off. Like he didn't say anything except, "Oh," and he's gone. And he's jumping on this rock and he's on that tire and he's running all around us, continuing like he was before. And my older son looks up to me and he says, "Dad, I know that you don't really care one way or another if Jason goes on the swing. So why did you say no?" I said, "Well, look at him." And we're watching him go jump all over the place. If Jason really, really wanted to go on the swing, what would he have done? And John looks at me and says, "Oh, he would have pestered you until you said yes." I said, "Exactly." And what did he do? Oh, he just took off. Yeah, so he didn't really want, he just came over and asked me and he didn't care and he didn't really want to do it. So I just said no. And so then he looks up at me and he says, "Do you do that to me?" So do we really want to do it, or are we just sort of mouthing the platitudes of what we want to do, right? And the answer in my mind is what Jason told us and taught us, which was, if I really want to do it, I'm going to push for it. Like your friend, 6 months researching new cars. If we don't really want to do it, then we get this little obstacle of someone says no, and it's like, oh, okay. And then we go and continue doing whatever it is. And so I guess one of the challenges for everybody listening to this now and later is, where do you think you want to be and go, but you don't really want to? And where do you really want to be that you're not going to because you're stuck in your comfort zone?
Awesome.
All right. So thank you for joining us, everybody. We'll see you next time.